Recording. Okay, recording is in progress. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Alma Weekly Stream. I'm your host, Joshua Timberman, Head of Community and Advocacy here at Alma. I also have with me Pete Cheslock, Chief Product Officer at Alma. And today we have a special guest, Megan Gleason. Megan, please introduce yourself and let our viewers know where you work, what you do there, and how did you get your Twitter handle?
Oh God. Yes, hello. I work at Honeycomb, world's leading observability platform. I'm the VP of product there. I've been with the company for about 2 years. How did I get my Twitter handle? Well, like Megs was I was late to Twitter, I don't know, 2013 or something, and all the good Megs were taken. Only my good friends get to call me Megs. And then sometimes people mess it up and call me Meg, and then that's like not a thing. But anyway, I like fish. I'm really interested in marine biology, so fine, fish Megs. That's what it is.
Perfect.
Nice. Do you have fish at home? Like, do you have like a
Not
setup?
anymore. I used to have a coral reef tank, and then I had a kid. I was like, oh, I super don't have time for this anymore because they require a lot of maintenance and attention. So when he was a toddler, we got rid of it.
Probably a safe bet given the destructive nature of children.
Yes.
That too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were just talking about our cat, and she's 21. And when she goes, which should be soon, she's 21. My wife says, we're going to get a nice fish.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like we're bad about animals. My kids are always asking for animals. And of course, during the pandemic, like everyone got a puppy, a dog, a cat, a hamster. It's a whole menagerie of different animals in this neighborhood. And they're like, oh, we should get one. And I'm like, if I can't flush it when it dies, like we're definitely not getting one.
That's horrible. Yeah, we got my son a cat. He's 9 now. And last year got him a cat. And I wish I had done it sooner in the pandemic. We did it sort of like, we were already like a year in. Because what he said to me, it broke my heart. He was like, now I have a friend. I was just like,
good to have
that one.
Yeah.
That one's going to cut right at you.
It is. It truly is. So speaking of the pandemic, no, we weren't speaking of the pandemic, but I am curious. So how is it you found yourself to be the VP of product at the best observer? Like Honeycomb invented observability, right? Like Charity coined the term, I think. So tell us about your adventure.
So I was working at Auth0 a couple of years ago. It was a good time. Me and Auth0 did pretty well. But it was a good time for a change. And actually a former colleague of ours from Chef Evo sent me a link to a post that, Charity was tweeting about hiring a senior product manager. And he was like, I know, like, you're a director of product, senior product manager, that's probably not your jam, but it's Honeycomb. And I had been watching what Honeycomb was doing. I knew Charity from back in the chef days as well-ish. I mean, she doesn't remember me. I, of course, remember her, right? And the first thing I did was I called Adam Jacob, founder of Chef. So Charity had been on the Chef open source board of governance, as you know, Joshua. So she and Adam are good friends. And I called Adam and was like, hey, what do you think? Like, would I be crazy to go to work for Charity Majors? Like, what would that be like? And Adam was like, no, you would not. And here's why Charity is amazing and whatever. Charity apparently did the exact same thing. So as soon as I applied, she called Adam and was like, who's this Megan Gleason? So Adam was really the matchmaker there. I mean, I have Evo and Adam to thank for connecting us. I was not what Charity was looking for. Like, she really was trying to hire a senior product manager, but I convinced her that she needed me, and that she didn't just need somebody who, can do product manager things, which are important and needed to be done at Honeycomb, but somebody that could help start setting a direction for how the company was going to grow and put a product strategy in place and that kind of stuff. So when I joined, Honeycomb was 35 people. I was really the first product hire. We hired our first design leader like a month after that. And now we've built the team up. There's 12 of us in product and design. So it's been fun. I mean, I guess that's how it happened. Twitter is how it happened. That's how it always happens.
It's true, actually. Pete, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is such an amazing resource for, jobs, like just extending your network. So it's not just the city that you happen to live in with your close
Mm.
connection, and it just expands it just wildly.
Yeah, our poor recruiter at Honeycomb, who's lovely, Amanda, she's like, will you do some stuff on LinkedIn? Will you do this? I'm like, LinkedIn, like, really? Do they have to? I just, like, it is not my go-to. It is just not my go-to.
Yeah, I still don't understand LinkedIn. Like I see people post stuff and they get like all these reactions, and then I look at the date stamp, it's like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, why is this showing up in my feed now? That's weird.
Oh yeah, LinkedIn is just it's really good for a long delayed shit posting. Twitter is like immediate shit posting, but if you need like a long delayed one, like a real slow burn, that is LinkedIn is where you want to go.
Yeah.
So we'll see posts about log4j over there in like a week and a half.
Exactly.
Dude, mind blown. You know what I read somewhere? It's pronounced Log4j.
No, I disagree. Agree to disagree on that one.
Dude, how?
I just don't feel good about that. I don't know what it is, but
it makes everybody uncomfortable.
It definitely makes me uncomfortable. I can see it either way, because also it's like logs for Java, like J is for Java sort of thing, but also like you forge logs. I don't know. It's weird. It's going to be amazing.
It's bad that it works is I think what makes me so uncomfortable is that if it's correct and I've just been wrong this whole time, that won't feel good.
Yeah.
But it's just too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, bad.
I will have a picture to show in the description once we get this in a format where it's displayed to others, of why it's log4j versus log4j, and all of that is very amusing. We actually had a conversation. We did hangops earlier today, and there was a conversation around pronunciation of things.
Yeah, it's the classic, like, if you've only learned of a word through reading, like you have to kind of make up your own pronunciation. But I feel like that is like to the next level for all of the commands that people will run, like Linux commands, open source commands and stuff. Obviously, there's always the jokes about how to pronounce kubectl, kubectl, like there's those jokes. But then, I mean, in one of my other Slack chats, we were talking today about like, the fsck command for Fisk. I always call it Fisk, but other people call it something totally different. It's really fun to just hear just the different ways people have come up with their own pronunciations.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, do they replace the S with a U, or like what happens with alternate like how would you pronounce that other than Fisk?
Oh, I mean, people were saying I should pull up some of what they were saying. I mean, some were very like, well, it's like your disk is effed. I don't know what our rating is on Twitch, so I can't bleep it out. But
right.
But they were like,
our rating is this is not for kids, I think.
Well, because they'd be bored.
They would totally. Yeah, we're not playing video games here, so like this is an unusual
suck,
medium.
which I thought was pretty funny. FS check, actually saying FS check.
I've heard that one used. Yeah.
See that?
Yeah.
F suck.
That's what you say, like, oh F, this sucks.
Indeed.
Where it comes from.
Indeed. So tell me more about how it is that you got into product management, though.
Well, that was also chef related. I started working in tech in the late 90s, before the .com, whatever, kerfuffle. And at that point in time, it was just like, oh, are you breathing? Like, do you know how to operate a computer? Like, we have a job for you in tech. And so I started as doing configuration management, and this was ye olden times. So, I mean, I was the build monkey, and I did the builds, and like everything was sort of managed via Windows file system. It's like, it was so bad. And then we'd make the gold master, and then we'd like burn it onto the physical media and put it in a box and mail it to people. And
then it's outdated as soon as it gets to them.
Exactly. So that sucked. I did that for about 6 months and was like, this is terrible. I had a great mentor at that time who was the VP of engineering at this little startup that I worked at in Seattle. And he was like, you have aptitude, you're bossy. Like have you considered a career in program management. I was like, I do not know what that is. And so think back, 1998, like the way that people were building software at that time, especially in the Pacific Northwest, was very, very sort of like Microsoft influenced. So in fact, as a program manager, what I became was a Microsoft style program manager, and product managers didn't really even exist at that time, or where they did exist, they usually sat in marketing, and they had a very different sort of job than product managers do today. But as a program manager, I sat in engineering, and one of my primary responsibilities was writing the functional spec, helping engineers supposedly know what to build that was maybe going to result in some sort of outcome, at least like we would hope software would come out the other end. Whether anybody liked it or found value in it, that was sort of beside that. That wasn't really what we were concerned with. But all very waterfall. I mean, back in those days, even the very early, iterative things were being described as like spiral, if you remember that word. Like, it just like none of that stuff had really come to be.
So isn't a spiraling a waterfall that spirals? Isn't that a whirlpool? And you want to avoid those?
I know, it's bad. I thought it was a bunch of hooey, honestly. But anyway, so this is a long way of saying, like, I sort of had that foundation in program management, but in the old style of program management. And I did things like program management for a long time, usually in engineering organizations. I also spent some time in operations organizations. I ran a monitoring tools team, that sort of thing. And when I came to work at Chef, I was brought on by an exec who I'd worked with elsewhere, who basically just was like, you need to come work here. You're going to like this DevOps stuff, which I had never even heard of. These people are weird and you're going to get along great with them, which is definitely true. Joshua, especially. And I was working in Success, and I was like running a technical account management org, which I had never done and I wasn't very enthusiastic about. And they were working with a customer of Chef to co-develop something that at that time was a bespoke solution, but Adam and Seth Falcon were talking about productizing, and that was Chef Delivery, which was a CI/CD product. I thought that was the coolest shit I had ever seen, and I wanted to become more involved. Now, I had never been a product manager before, and I thought I didn't really know what that job was. And in fact, had experienced a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time as a program manager, that, product managers have some like wizardry or special powers or something. They can like see the future, and I could never do that, really good at execution, but how do you do that sort of strategy and vision piece? So I kind of weaseled my way in. I made up a job and pitched it to the VP of product at Chef at that time, which was product operations. I basically was there to help Seth, who was really building the product, with like running early access programs and getting early feedback from the first few customers, and sort of learning as quickly as we could about what was working for people and what wasn't. And did that for a bit, again, 6 or 8 months or something like that. And then I raised my hand and said, I feel like I want to be the product manager for Chef Delivery. Can I have that job? And Alex and Seth said, okay. And that's how I started doing product management. So that was not until 2015. So although I've been working in tech for a long time, it wasn't until 6 years ago that I made that transition into product. And I felt so stupid when I did, because 80% of the job of program management, at least how I had learned it, and that's sort of, again, like being embedded with the technical teams, being really interested in how we build together and what we're building and for whom and so on. Almost all of that translated to product management. I really felt like there was only about 20%, sort of new skills and methods that I needed to pick up and apply. So I think I've been able to move quickly through the ranks in product management because all of those, previous years of experience had a lot of bearing. That was a very long answer.
No, that was a great answer.
Great answer.
Yeah, I really like how the 80-20 principle just always shows up everywhere all the time. Like it's as if it's a principle that
like it's not just a cliche. It's like real. like there's so many things that seem like, wow, I could, like, that's so different, or so like I could never do that thing. And often it's just like this small bit of stuff, new knowledge or tools that you need to acquire.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the way for a lot of these things, like, software engineering isn't magic. It seems like magic when you look at the outside, when you don't have kind of knowledge of it. I think I saw a tweet that was like a perfect representation of like, whenever you think that like something is a hack, just remember that we like taught rocks how to think.
Totally.
And it was like, well, we flattened them first and we like put lightning through it. And it just like, it like made my day.
Yeah,
that's so
I
good.
love that.
Taught rocks how to think. That's so true. Yeah, I feel like that 80% of what I do lately with this streaming is, you know, figuring out how OBS works. For the JJ fans out there, they'll know that OBS is fiddleware, so that rings true.
You just keep clicking and maybe something will happen.
and maybe your sound will work. Maybe it'll get routed to the right device. Who knows? Oh my goodness. So I'm curious, you worked on Chef Delivery, which was not an open source product at first-ish. And I don't think it was ever really itself was actually open source,
they did the thing where they like made everything open source except not really. And
yeah. But you know, other products at Chef were open source, and a lot of things that Chef Delivery was built on were open source, like the push job system, Chef Server itself, and that sort of thing. And then some of those features came to automate, and like there was like this whole product evolution. So I'm curious what your thoughts are from having, you know, worked in various teams doing product and program management over the years. What are some of the major differences between working on products that are open source, such as Chef or that, versus those that are not? Like Auth0, I don't think is open source, but it has like open APIs. Honeycomb, I don't know that Honeycomb's like the API and the service aren't open source, but it probably uses open source components.
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
I mean, you know, I was always at Chef, I was always working on the commercial products. And so even though I was sort of like soaking in this open source environment, and that was the sort of provenance of the company and the roots, I really wasn't very involved in the open source side of things, right? So when I was leading product as a director of product at Chef, there were PMs like Charles Johnson and others who were much more involved in the open source side of things. But I will say I gained a real appreciation for the power of community in particular. And I saw just sort of how powerful that can be, not only in terms of all of the great benefit you get on the evolution of those open source components, but also like, cynically, you know, as sort of like a base for your commercial products. You know, people that were part of the Chef community for a long time were bringing Chef into their organizations and championing Chef and helping us sell Automate, right? So there is a virtuous cycle there for sure. You're right, both Auth0 and Honeycomb are like commercial concerns. I'll talk more about Honeycomb because like that's where I am now and it's fun. With Honeycomb, I mean, obviously, like all of our SDKs and libraries are open source. We had an interesting sort of watershed moment last year where we have a component called Refinery, which is an on-prem component. So Honeycomb is a SaaS, but it's an on-prem component that customers can run to sample their data, right? So if you're getting millions of 200s and you only need to have 1 out of 10,000 of them come through in your data, like why should you pay for those? We do event-based pricing. So like, don't send us a bunch of events and pay us for them if they're not valuable to you. And with Refinery, it had started as an open source project under a different name. And we had this real tension moment and decision to make about like, well, are we going to close the source and like only make this available to enterprise customers? What we decided to do, and it's an outlier for Honeycomb, is we kept it open source, and we do have, you know, people who don't pay us or in our self-serve tier or whatever are using the product, using the component. But we only offer support to enterprise customers, right? So that's a way to sort of like split the difference. And it's been great having it open to the community. I mean, the people who really we use it at Honeycomb, like we use it as part of running the service, but of course our use cases are not the same as those in the real world with our customers. And so people are contributing and engaging, and there's good discussions happening in our pollinators community and so on about what people, you know, tips and tricks for using Refinery, ideas that people have that they're actually able to contribute back. So I love that. The other big thing for open source for Honeycomb is open telemetry. So the open telemetry project is a big deal. Like hot in CNCF right now, and certainly seems to be coming to be the standard for sort of that portable instrumentation strategy across vendors. And Liz Fong Jones, started talking with me about that shortly after I joined Honeycomb. She was really out in front of that and involved in. She's still on the board of governance for OTel. And for me, that was a no-brainer. I was like, absolutely, like we want to hitch our wagon to standards that are open, to things that support vendor, portability and neutrality. Like there's nothing but goodness for us to gain here. When people get nervous about that idea that like, well, but if it's really swappable, if it's super easy, if you've instrumented with OTel to drop Honeycomb and go use, I don't know, Datadog or something, I'm like, I ain't scared, man. Nobody's going to leave Honeycomb once they start using it. Like we just have to keep making our product great, right? There's nothing but upside for us here.
Right. And then you get the added benefit of somebody who's using OpenTel in their, I don't know, Prometheus or some other their own thing. And they're like, I don't want to run this anymore. And then it makes it very easy for them to switch that over and use Honeycomb. Absolutely. Or switch over from another vendor if pricing models change, or they go public and then the new publicly traded company does all kinds of stuff that is not, something that they're into, and then they can switch to another vendor like Honeycomb.
Right, Joshua. Anyway, right. The other thing for us in terms of strategy, I mean, think about like last year when we really went and made the decision, like we had a bunch of proof points and stuff for OTel. We wanted to see, how some things were going to work, and the maturity of the project and making sure it had momentum and good support and so on. But once we hit those proof points, one of the big benefits for us was we're a small team. We have like 4 engineers who work on telemetry at Honeycomb, and we support, at like sort of a premium level or whatever, top support level, 6 languages. And we're like, how can we do 30? People would be pinging us and be like, I want to know, I want a beeline. That's our auto instrumentation library. I want a beeline for Elixir. And I'm like, that is just so never going to happen. Like, there's no way with a team our size that we're going to get there. And OTel provides that place where, whatever the community is investing in and engaging in, we have an opportunity to just sort of connect into that and say like, well, if you're OTel, like you got it, no problem, right? And Honeycomb doesn't have to do proprietary bespoke stuff for like everything that our customers are trying to do.
Yeah. I think to your point too, on like the fear of, oh, if we support this open standard, then, we lose this vendor lock-in, right? Like,
right.
Which there's a lot of things we could talk about that. But I mean, I remember in the past, I was using, kind of in the before Datadog phase and like the very, very early before a lot of these tooling went out, there was a tool called Librato that I was a big fan of. And it basically had capability that you could push data using your existing collectee agents, right? So it's like I had this standard agent that was open source.
Yeah.
And it was sending my data in a very standard, like basically like the old school graphite, dot notation metric format. And we sent all of our data there, and we had all these dashboards and graphs or whatever. The concept, we eventually moved off of it, but it was like moving your bank, right? You have to move all of the dashboards, all of this. There's so much more to move than just that. And honestly, like we probably wouldn't have had the product actually done, more things we wanted to. And maybe it didn't cost as much. We were pretty price conscious, but still, I think to your point, it's way smarter just to invest in the product that people want, there.
Yeah.
You don't see people moving off of AWS because they have Terraform now, right? Like it's just,
yeah, nothing. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about open source and specifically open telemetry is that we, even though we're still a small shop, like Honeycomb, we're getting close to 100 people. Like I think we're gonna cross it before the end of the year. It's gonna be awesome. But like we're still tiny. Like people think we're much bigger than we are. And despite that, we think it's very important that we give into the project as well. And so any opportunity we have to upstream the work that we do in the OTel collector or whatever, we work that through. We participate in a number of SIGs. One of my product managers, Philip Carter, is like setting aside time every week to improve OTel docs, right? So he's doing all of that upstream because it's the rising tide thing, right? Like if we can make that project better to the best of our abilities to be able to invest, like that's going to result in great outcomes for everybody. So although Honeycomb is not going to be an open source shop, I think like we're obligated in the same way that we're benefiting from open source projects to contribute back as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the rising tide lifts all boats analogy. We're good on analogies and tropes, right? I like that because we're all in this together, and we had this conversation in the Hang Up stream earlier this week, where the world is complex. There's lots of complex problems and situations, and things like Log4j is just like, you may not realize that you have a vulnerability to that because it's a transitive dependency, because it's inside your hosted ActiveMQ on AWS or in Elasticsearch, but you're affected by it because all these other things happen, or right. Because the observability platform you use, they have a Log4j or whatever it might be, right?
We do not.
Not you, so some other one.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Watching the ripple of that is just incredible, unbelievable.
Yeah. So I as head of community here at Alma, I believe in community, of course, but also the nuances of we're not an open source product and platform. So we will have open source things in the future at some point, I'm sure, because I think it's pretty inevitable for any tech company these days is to have something, at least if it's a small project, or if it becomes like a plugin platform or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Cool. So do you bring in so your refinery on-prem thing is an open source project. Do you bring in features and work that comes from the community into the commercial product through that, or?
Do we? No, not directly. I mean, anything in the commercial product is closed source, right? All of our instrumentation libraries are open source as well, and so people have an opportunity to contribute to those. No, I mean, how I work, Joshua. Like, a lot of our product is absolutely built based on customer needs and feedback. We spend a lot of time with our users, and so we've got a strategy, we've got things that we're trying to do as a business, but we also are wanting to make sure that we're making the product lovable and loved as we go. So
do you use community feedback, like on GitHub issues or anything like that, as a way to inform any of that kind of product direction? Do you like?
Of course I do.
Okay. So you get some of it. So you don't necessarily get the code directly from the open source project, but you do get like the issues and things that people are looking, problems that they find, or things that they want to solve in new and innovative ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Like I wouldn't be a very good product manager if I ignored that kind of thing.
Right. Of course.
Right, Pete?
Well, leads into the buzzword of the thing, which is PLG, right? Like product-led growth. What are
so hot right now?
It's so hot right now. Obviously, this is a term. I don't know if it was specifically coined by OpenView Venture, but they definitely write the most about it. They have the most data on it. But yeah, I mean, it's like when you kind of hear about like what this is, and it's like, listening to your customers and like, having the product try to like sell itself, not always, right? There's like a lot of those things, you're kind of looking at it like for those of us, I feel like that have been in the, this world for so long, like I've spent so much money on software. I rarely, if ever, talk to a salesperson, right? Like my entry into most companies' products will be sign up for a free trial and start kicking the tires on it, like off the bat. And then only then will I actually want to have like a broader conversation.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we, a couple of years ago, upgraded our used to be called our community edition of Honeycomb. It was super tiny. This was back in the days when Honeycomb was metered based on data. So either volume of data ingested and volume of data stored. And you had these like horrible sliders that you had to, like, it was a bad time. When we moved to event-based pricing, or when we were about to, I was like, we need to make free more valuable. First of all, we had excluded a number of what I would describe as like fairly fundamental features from the community now free product entirely, which I was like, nah. Like, if you want people to get hooked and really understand what the product is and so on, like give them all the features. You might make mini versions of that, like triggers is an example in Honeycomb. That's like our answer to monitoring alerts, right? It's much higher volumes available in the paid product, but like there were 0 in the free product initially. I was like, no, give them 2. Like at least let them like try the thing and see if it works. People do want to have that experience of like, let me really kind of poke around all the nooks and crannies and see what this product is. And if you gate off a whole bunch of stuff from your free users, like it's the free product is not really doing its job.
There's I think the concept that Honeycomb did really well is, and this is a hard problem to solve too, which is so many products will just dump you in, right? I'm looking at you, Airtable. Airtable's better now, but like when I first used Airtable, people would rave about this and they were like, you should check out Airtable. And you go into Airtable and it's like, hey, it's a spreadsheet where every cell is its own spreadsheet. And you're like, this is overwhelming for me right now. Yeah. And even product management tools suffer this as well, where it's like, hey, welcome to this product management tool. It's just a giant spreadsheet you can infinitely customize to your needs. And I'm like, well, I don't actually know what my needs are yet, so it's like I want that guidance. In Honeycomb, I know especially in the earlier days, it was like, if you were to sign up, you'd have to send them your data to start getting value out of it. Right. And they had the sandbox, right? And then the guided sandbox was just like game changer, because even with a sandbox, it's like, you're not really sure how to use the product, but then to be guided through on, here's how you might use the tool to actually debug this real scenario that happened. I feel like it's just the whole next level of what a lot of these products should do to help kind of teach you and guide you.
Yeah, I mean,
you're in this world.
You're so kind. Honestly, I think we have a ton of work to do in this area. So you're right that we do the sandbox thing is now called Play. It's at play.honeycomb.io. It's cool, but like it sits outside of the product, right? And what I really want to do is I want to have that same sort of getting started experience for people that, like when they create a team, like when they really are in the product. We actually just formed a growth team at Honeycomb in the last few months, and one of the existential discussions that we had about it, because we've been talking about it for quarters and quarters, like we've just been busy, man. When we finally got around to doing it, was should it sit in marketing? Should it sit in product? And those are the sort of leading contenders. And ultimately, I really came around and made a pretty strong argument that it should sit in product. And that, first of all, it's product-led growth, right? So there's that, but also because I have really strong feelings about how we position the product with technical users. I think it's so easy to alienate or just irritate engineers, and like I was really worried. This is not a dig on my colleagues in marketing, they're amazing, but like was really worried about crossing some line in our growth efforts to having the outreach and the education that we were trying to do turn into sort of like something a little more on the like sales side of things. And I just like the product should sell itself, and people, if they understand how to use it and get value out of it right away, the rest will come. So we now have a director of growth who's part of the product organization, and she's fantastic. And they're just getting started on some of those experiments where, instead of having to go to Play outside of the product, you load up a sample app. You don't have to instrument your own code, but we've got like sample apps out on Glitch and stuff where you can just start interacting with those and see how it instruments, have it connect, push data into your Honeycomb team so you can see what that data looks like and start, exploring the visualizations and so on. So I think we have a long way to go, honestly. I think that like people who get the product right away are people who are, experienced users who probably have spent a lot of time with monitoring or APM tools. Honeycomb is different, but it's familiar enough that you can sort of orient yourself and get going. But for folks who haven't, it's still a steep hill. So,
well, this is the thing that we often forget about is, especially like as a former operator, I'm like, we're very much the 1%ers of the knowledge of like DevOps. And I talk to companies, they're still, you talk about building the golden image CD, and like, that's normal for still a lot of companies out there. Yeah. The first level of monitoring that many companies look at is logging, like just get logging somewhere. And there are so many places that just, they're not even at that stage yet. And to then talk to them about distributed tracing, it's like, well, they haven't done the crawl part yet. You can't teach them how to run.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I try to be conscious of as well, which is that, there's a lot of folks that are new into the space that just don't have like the expertise behind them, or the company just was never doing that.
I think it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because in terms of putting a vision into the world about how things can be better, how we can build software better together, how we can operate that software better together, how we can practice service ownership, and like all of these like aspirational things, like you need a team that actually lives that way, because first of all, you're going to go a lot faster and like have a better time. But like you can't create that vision in the world. You can't manifest that if you're not sort of doing it and living it, which means that it becomes easy for us to forget that, like, yeah, we are in the elite category on the door metrics or whatever, like we're like most people in the world are not having this experience when they're building and supporting products together. So it's hard, I think, because like we don't want to dumb it down. We want that vision, that like North Star to inspire people to be better and to level up their practices and like have better lives as a result. But you also need to understand where they are today. It's tricky.
I also love that you're like, yeah, we got so much further to go. Like that's spoken like a true product owner. Cause like from the outside, you know how it is. Like you look at the outside and you're like, oh, like everyone looks across the yard and sees the grass and how green it is. And I look at my yard and I'm like, I just see the spots that need all the work.
Yeah, totally.
It's always how it is.
It's true. I solved that problem by getting rid of my front yard.
Just rocks now, asphalt. What do you got?
No, we had it xeriscaped this summer. So there's rock mulch, and then we've got a ton of flowers and shrubs, and it's lovely.
Nice.
I'll send you a picture. It's delightful. Yeah.
At one point in my life, I will I'll call it rage quit my yard. Like I'm still like peak suburban dad. So yep, I'm like out there battling the squirrels and the chipmunks and like, got to have the perfect green. But at some point I'm going to just like rage quit the lawn game and just like put like a vegetable garden in there, and just take the whole front yard and just, it's like great sunny spot and just boom, vegetable garden.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, but that may happen.
Right there is going to be our vegetable garden. We get a lot of sun through there in the afternoons during the summer. So that's the backyard, but the front yard's over I don't know. Doesn't matter.
What would you say? I'm kind of curious, as you've, kind of from the program manager to product manager. I know there's a lot of people who want to become product managers. It's kind of the hot role, but a very misunderstood role too. Because again, I don't think a lot of people truly know even what it looks like, including myself. Like I continually know always like, it's like different in every company, right?
Yeah. For sure.
But I talk with a lot of folks that are like on the engineering side, and they have a lot of thoughts and opinions about how software should be built and what features should be there, and want to maybe make that jump and leap. Also, there's not a lot of 2 a.m. Product emergencies. Like
it's true.
Product, I need this PowerPoint like 2 a.m. Right? So there's some definite perks there, but I would say, what are the biggest things that you've kind of learned are like, really like critical to think about for people who maybe want to make that transition?
Yeah. First of all, next time you talk to one of those people, have them call me. Twitter DMs are open. Like I'm trying to hire another developer experience PM, and they're super hard to find. Like people who have both done software engineering and product management and have both skill sets and are really like oriented around developer experience. Super hard to find. I found one and I can't find a second one. So I will turn an engineer who is inclined into a product manager if I find the right engineer. So just saying.
DM's open.
Twitter.
DM's
open.
There you go.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think honestly, of course there's like skills and tools and so on that you'll need to learn, but I think so much of it is grounded in more orientation and attitude. Being very curious about like why we are doing a thing. And I don't mean in that like grumpy engineer way of like, what the hell, like does this seem like sounds hard, why should we do this? And so like I don't mean like that. I mean like really being curious, feeling connected to the business and being curious about like what's the problem that we're solving by building this thing, and is that the most important problem for us to solve right now? And if it is, is this the best solution to that problem, or like, are there other ways to think about it? I think that, the very cynical view of engineers, and or maybe only in like the saddest organizations, that like, oh, I just do what it says in the ticket, and like, what's more heartbreaking than that? I think both as like to work in a team where that's the prevailing attitude, as well as like to be that person. I don't know, like, it just sounds awful. So I think honestly, most engineers I've worked with are really curious about like why we're doing a thing or how this is going to help users. I think people want to feel that what they're building is like impactful and helpful to people, makes people feel good to use their products. So you start by sort of harnessing that energy, right? And then thinking about what value creation actually would look like, because that is essentially the job of a product manager. If you've looked at any of the Marty Kagan stuff, like he's got the triad model, and it's like UX or design, they're responsible for making sure that the product is usable and intelligible and accessible. Engineering, they're really responsible for feasible and maintainable and scalable. And product managers, we are here to create value. We are here to create value for users and for the business. And so everything that we do needs to be looked at through that lens. So I think any engineer that can sort of like start thinking about things that way, reach out to product managers that you like working with and become more involved in product definition. If the PMs are worth any, worth their salt, they're going to really welcome engineering input and design input very early in the process of trying to figure out what to build. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities for engineers to make that transition, especially if you want to work in dev tools. Like having the engineering background and going into product leadership is very, very helpful. I do not have an engineering background, and I've chosen to work in these like very technical product areas, and I'm doing fine. It's okay. Like I would not describe myself as not technical, even though I've never had the job of engineer, because that's just crappy and people shouldn't think that about themselves. But like there are times for sure where my intuition breaks down because I haven't written a lot of code. I wrote some VB. It was awful. So like I don't have that same sort of feeling that I can have with interacting with a UI or other parts of a product when it comes to, doing something with an API or working with one of our instrumentation libraries. I don't have it. And so I think that engineers for dev tools in particular can bring, experience and points of view that are really valuable in the product role.
Yeah, I think any company that is probably being smart about it should try to create those moments instead of waiting for it to happen. Like really, or just finding the people who do have thoughts and opinions on what they're building, which again should be all the people, I would imagine, should be many of the people that you're hiring, right?
Yeah. I know it used to be, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be sort of a screener question for hiring engineers at Honeycomb. I don't know the phrasing, but like basically, do you give a shit about the business? Like, are you, we don't hire engineers who aren't committed to like the success of Honeycomb, like that we are a for-profit concern, and like you need to care about that.
Yeah, actually the interview question I like to ask is when people talk about previous companies, asking them how the business made its money. Like, and even if they understood to the level of like understanding like margins and stuff, it's like, well, yeah, what was the biggest, kind of place that you were spending that was affecting your margins? And sometimes you have people who are like, ooh, and they like love to dive into it. And then some people are like, oh, I have no idea. It's like,
no idea. Although, I mean, not all companies not all leadership are completely
transparent.
All the things. Yeah. You should have like some notion.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, different every company though. You're at a big enterprise, maybe you don't even know. You're just like down in a cog in a machine.
I'm a cog.
Yeah. And then you just care about what's in the ticket.
What's in the ticket?
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, this is a fun conversation, but unfortunately, we're running short on time. So this is the part of the show where we diverge into some other topic. In the past, we've talked about Murray's cheese shops. We've talked about
We've been on a bit of a
Whiskey.
cheese kick recently.
We have been on a cheese kick. We've been on a whiskey kick. We had Doug Ireton a couple weeks ago, and he had some recommendations for, yes, we do love Doug. He had some recommendations for whiskey. Any shout outs or recommendations you have
For whiskey?
for anything? You
Any
can talk about whiskey.
That
I was just
you
leading. I just saw whiskey in your
into.
Twitter profile, so I thought I'd mention that.
Oh, I
one, but
do like whiskey. Oh no.
oh,
Did you
you're
lose me?
here.
Do you
No,
still
you're
hear
here.
me?
Yep.
We still see you.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Uh-oh. She can't hear us.
Keep talking.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
keep
we're
talking.
still
I can feel dead space.
I'm back.
Okay, good.
I don't know why my AirPods decided to connect suddenly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh God, that's the worst. Yeah.
So I
And,
mean,
and they
my-
connect when you don't want them to. Never mind. It's
And they
computers.
don't connect when you do. Yes.
my controversial position on whiskey is Scotch is not whiskey. Life's too short to drink a bog. So I am like, oh man, the faces. So I am a fan of the rye and Irish whiskey in particular. Bourbon, yeah, bourbon has its place. My absolute favorite whiskey is Middleton Rare Irish Whiskey, which 1D, which is like Jameson's like craft distillery. It's really hard to find. I tried to buy a bottle for a friend recently, and like no liquor stores in San Francisco had it. Like it was just, I don't know, supply chain issues, but it's absolute like nectar of the gods. It is fantastic. And that's what I have to say about whiskey.
Huh. Scotch is not whiskey, is it?
No.
I suppose we'll have to have a whiskey off or something at some point when we can be in person and travel with this whole
I'm into it.
pandemic thing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of. I weirdly like. I feel like a lot of people start with like maybe bourbon and then they move into Scotch kind of later on. I had actually started. I had a friend who was like a Scotch person. I started with Scotch and I had really enjoyed it. And then actually more recently, maybe probably as Scotch prices have risen, have gotten into bourbon. Specifically, like there's a great store who goes and gets single barrels, and it could be a brand that you know really well, like Maker's Mark, but they'll do their own custom barrels. And so it's just like, I feel like it's just like with everything in life, it's just like chasing flavor and chasing experience, and that's where like the cheese thing, I always bring up the cheese because it's just like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're just eating like cheese that went so bad that it's now good again. Like it's milk that is so bad it's now good, and it's just it's all different in its own special way.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say that life is too short to drink a bog, because peaty scotches are my favorite. I'm
Bless
one
you.
of those
I
types.
like a pandemic lesson for me is like to not crap on things that make people happy. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
like I'm so glad that you enjoy Scotch whiskey. I'm really glad that you get pleasure out of that.
Yeah, somebody to buy that Scotch whiskey that's on the shelf, and you don't have to. Yeah, I'm fairly picky in general, so when it comes to food, so I definitely do not yuck somebody else's yum. I don't like dill pickles, but there are a lot of people that love them, and you can have the kitchen can put my dill pickles on your plate if you like them. If you don't, then like it's cool, and
I absolutely do, and I will take your pickle.
I was
You can have my
a
Scotch.
pickle. I was a pickle hater for most of my life until more recently, and now I'm just like, and mushrooms too. I got weird with like I wasn't a mushroom person, so it's kind of weird how it all comes around again. Just got to give it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't do vinegar. That's really the thing. And pickles are soaked in vinegar
They are.
and all that. So yeah, kind of spoils it for me. Alrighty. Well, Megan, thank you so much for joining us and chatting with us, telling us your perspective on product management and your story on how you got here. This will wrap up today's stream. If people want to get a hold of you, you are Fishmegs on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. That's me.
Excellent.
Don't message me on LinkedIn.
No, apparently not.
I just sent you a LinkedIn request, so you know.
She'll get it in a couple weeks.
Please join my professional shitposting network. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all out there for watching and for chatting with us and our guest. If anybody would like to join us on the stream, you can hit us up at community@alma.io or tweet at tryalma or tweet at me, Jay Timberman. And we'll have links aplenty for you in the descriptions and the chat and all that good stuff. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.